Hi everybody, it's Lisa here from ProWritingAid. Thanks for being here today. For anybody that's new, I think there's quite a few new people here today. ProWritingAid started these free training sessions for writers back in March of last year when we had the first lockdown, and our goal then and still today is to help keep writers productive and inspired and learning something even if they're stuck at home and things are a bit strange out in the world. And so this is something like our 60th session, and all these amazing people out in the world have been very kind and offered all of their free services. And today is no different. We are going to talk about how to finally finish revising your novel. And so I'm really excited to introduce my guest today. This is Mary Adkins. Hi, Mary.
Hi.
Hi. So Mary is the author of the novels When You Read This and Privilege, and her newest novel, Palm Beach, is going to be coming out, published by HarperCollins this summer. Her books have been published in 13 countries, and her essays have appeared in the New York Times and the Atlantic and Slate and a bunch of others. She's also a writing coach, and she loves helping writers get their books written and make them as good as they can possibly be. So it's great to have you here with us today, Mary. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure. So happy to be here.
Good. So we've had some slight technical difficulties before we opened up the webinar. Hopefully we'll be okay today, but Mary's in Nashville, Tennessee, which is where the AT&T building was bombed on Christmas Day. And so her internet has been a little bit patchy. But if she disappears at any point, we'll just sit tight because she has a hotspot and she can come back in another way. So fingers crossed, everything will be fine.
Yes, please sit tight. Hopefully it won't happen. Fingers crossed.
Hopefully it won't happen. Should be fine. So Mary, do you want to go ahead and share your screen, and I'm just going to hand over to you and disappear and have a cup of tea and learn along with everybody else. Looks like we've got a great crowd here today.
Yeah, super. Let's see. It's telling me you have to stop sharing screen.
Oh, yes. There we go.
Perfect. Great. Okay, so let's dive right in. I want to talk revision today, how to revise your novel once the right way. And the reason that I chose this topic, I thought it would be so useful to share, is because I have learned from experience. I've learned the hard way what a toll not knowing how to revise can take on your life and your writing process. My first novel, When You Read This, which came out in 2019, I started writing in 2012, and I think I revised it like over 9 times. Maybe well over 9 times, at least 9 times, because I didn't know how to revise. And today I want to talk about the most important things when it comes to revision, so that you don't have to make that same mistake and take 7 years to revise your novel when you really can get through it much faster and do it more effectively. So what I want to do today is talk through 3 big points. First, I want to start out with what you don't need to do when you're revising. Then I want to talk about what you absolutely do need to do. And then I'm going to give you 2 of my favorite revision tools, the future book review and the revision pyramid. And these 2 things together will really make your revision process a lot more organized and a lot more painless. So let's start with what not to do. First thing is, you don't need to start right away. In fact, I would absolutely not start right away. This is the first big mistake I made back in 2013-ish when I was diving into revision. I finished my manuscript one day. I was so happy that I went and got my first tattoo. That's actually a burn. I burned myself a lot in the kitchen. That's the tattoo. And bought myself a pair of really nice boots. And then I think I started revising the next day. If any of you have done that, you know what I'm talking about. It is not a good idea, and it's not a good idea for reasons we're going to get more into in a moment. But you don't want to start revising right away as much as you want to, and I get the impulse. It does not benefit you to do that. Number 2, you don't want to approach revision like a writer. And I know that probably sounds weird, maybe counterintuitive, because you are the writer, but you don't want to approach it like a writer. And I'll talk more about that in a moment too. And 3, you don't want to edit. Okay, so editing is different from revision, which I didn't know. Again, back in the day, I didn't know that. And it's really important that you not edit. What you do want to do, and we're going to get more into that too, no worries. What you do want to do is you want to set your draft aside for anywhere between 3 and 6 weeks. You want to approach your draft like a reader. And then when it is time to revise, you want to revise big to small, okay? So let's talk about what I mean by each of these things, okay? So when you come to your draft that you have written, so either, you know, I actually teach in my course, the 12-week book draft, and to my coaching clients, that it's best to handwrite your novel for a number of reasons. But then you know, once you handwrite it, you need to transcribe it. So once you have transcribed your novel, or if you have typed your first draft and you come back to reading it, if you open up the file or print out the hard copy and turn to the first page and you remember writing the sentence, it's too soon, okay? Because that means that you are still coming at it like the writer. You're coming at it like the person who has created these sentences. And that makes you invested in them in a way that doesn't allow you to be as objective as you want to be. Okay, so that's one big indicator. It's my favorite indicator of whether it's too soon. If I remember writing the particular sentences, it's too soon. And I say the sentences because of course you remember writing the story. Like, of course, I mean, I've recently in the last few months finished a draft of my third novel, Palm Beach. And of course I remember, oh, this is about Mickey and Rebecca and their marriage. And I remember everything that happens in it. I mean, I've spent well over a year with these people. I know them well. But that's different than remembering writing the particular sentence. Okay. And there may be an exception. If you've obsessed over a particular sentence, you may remember it, but you get the idea, you get the gist. In general, you don't want to remember writing the sentences. The second indicator that it's too soon is if you absolutely love it or you absolutely hate it. So if you come at the draft and you think, man, this is brilliant, there's really not much to fix here. Or and more likely, because we're writers and we all tend to be very hard on ourselves and quite masochistic in my experience, if you hate it, you think, why did I waste my time? This may be the worst thing anyone's ever written. There's nothing salvageable here. Again, probably you're coming at it that way. If you're like me, it's too soon. I had this experience with When You Read This. Again, that was my first novel. So I revised it a million times. And when I revised it the last time, it actually was pretty good, but I didn't know that because I came back to it too soon. I came back to it only about 3 weeks after I'd set it aside and read it. And I thought I just wasted my time completely revising it yet again. It's stupid. Not like I'm embarrassing myself. I mean, these were the thoughts I was having, but what I didn't realize at the time was it was just too soon. So when you come back to it, after you've set it aside for, again, 3 to 6 weeks, my sweet spot is 4 to 5 weeks. You want to feel like you would feel if a friend who is a pretty good writer gave you their book. Okay. So their first draft, I should say, not their book, their first draft. So how would you feel? Well, you'd probably notice some things that you'd want to change, like, oh, I don't know if I'd open with this sentence, or I actually think this first chapter goes on too long. But you'd also notice some things that you think are working, like, oh, this line is really funny. Like, oh, she handles this description really well. That kind of attitude, that it's not extreme, it's not mean, it's a tone that's both encouraging but also honest. That's the kind of attitude you want to be able to bring to your own work, the same attitude you would bring to a friend's work. And that's why it's so essential to set it aside, because you can't manufacture that attitude. That attitude has to come organically with time. Time is what gives birth to that attitude. And so that's why it's so critical to do. Now, I really like the analogy of a birthday cake when I'm talking about setting your draft aside, because I think it just really, like, nothing else captures this idea. Like, you can think of your first draft as a bowl of the batter, and you've put in all the ingredients and they're in the right proportions and they're there. And like, if everything goes well, this is going to come out as a book. But if you start trying to like shape it or ice it, or God forbid, eat it before you've put it in the oven and let it bake, gross, right? It's a disaster. So you have to put the baking part is critical to the process. Just because you're not doing anything, just because it's in the oven and you get to go, you know, watch The Office for the 99th time or read some poetry or mow your yard, doesn't mean that that work isn't happening. It's happening. You just don't have to involve your brain in this particular phase, which is nice. Enjoy it. You get a little break. Okay. So when it is time to take it out of the oven and begin revision, you want to approach it like a reader. So a moment ago when I said you don't want to approach it like a writer, what I meant is that you want to approach it like a reader. And the reason for this is because when we approach drafts like our drafts like a writer, tendency is to get very much in our heads about things that really have more to do with our own egos than they do the work itself. So how is the arc? Is my arc good? How do my sentences sound? Are my sentences beautiful? Am I using good vocabulary? Do I feel like a good writer for writing this book? Like there, you know, even if those thoughts are subconscious, I think those are what really kind of overshadow everything else when we're reading it like the person who wrote it. When we're reading it like a reader, we just let that, like, I want you to think for a second about what you read like as a reader when you're reading someone else's work. Maybe you're focused on things like craft because you're a writer and you're a nerd like me. I do notice those things for sure. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'm paying attention to a good metaphor. I love a good metaphor. But more than that, when I am reading for pleasure, that's what I want. I want pleasure. I want not to be bored. I want to feel something. I want to be invested in the characters. I want not to be able to put the book down. I want to have opened a book after dinner. It's 7:30. I'm on my couch. I've put my kid to sleep. And I want to forget what has happened in my day, what's happened in politics, what's happened in the world today, just for a few minutes to give my brain a break. That is what I want. And so as a reader, that's what we're looking for. On revision, as a writer, we want to get in that brain space and that reader's brain space, because that's how we're going to notice the gaps that our future readers are going to notice, right? Like, our future readers don't care that much about whether, you know, we use the most brilliant metaphor on page 43. They care about how they feel when they're reading it, and if they can put it down or not, and if they want to pick it up the next night. So as we're revising, that's really the headspace we want to get into. All right. So that's what we're going to want to do. And I'm going to talk more about that in a moment too. But before we do that, I want to share my first tool with you, because this is where it comes in the process, which is the future book review. I love the future book review. I teach it now to my students and I do it myself. The future book review is a book review that you write of the book that you want to have written. So not the book that you wrote. You haven't read it yet. You don't know what you wrote. You hope you know what you wrote, but you don't yet. So it's a book review of your book in an ideal world. Okay. So let's talk about what this means. Okay. So this is just a short review, like a blurb. I'm talking 3 to 6 sentences, not long, not like a long New York Times style, you know, critics review. This is more like a short blurb that someone might put in, you know, an Oprah magazine on the what to read next page. Okay. So it's about the book that you hope or wish you wrote, not the book you actually wrote. It's an aspirational summary. You're not trying to accurately reflect what you just got on the page, right? Next, you want it to include major plot points and also the major thematic elements. So it should absolutely answer the question, like, what is this book about? You know, like literally what happens in it. But it should also go beyond just what happens and touch on the human question being addressed in the book. I'll give you an example of that shortly. And then you want it to be beautiful. You want it to be a beautiful book review and compelling. And this is not because it's for other people. You're not trying to impress anyone. You're not trying to, you know, get a head start on the back copy of your book for when it hits shelves. You want it to be beautiful for yourself, because this is going to become a touchstone for your book as you go through revision, and you want it to be something that you enjoy revisiting. Okay, so let me give you a couple of examples. Two of these examples are going to be from my novels, and one of them is from a recent memoir published by Glennon Doyle, because I think this works for memoir as well, and I imagine we have some people here working on nonfiction. So Palm Beach is my novel that's coming out in August, and so this is how I might write a book review, or how I would have written a book review for Palm Beach when I was revising. When Mickey, an actor / caterer, and Rebecca, a journalist, meet and fall in love, it seems too good to be true. They're mad for one another. They marry months after meeting, and soon Rebecca is pregnant. When it turns out their son is sick, very sick, it leads them to question their most deeply held values. Who are they as individuals? And if they're not who they once believed, what does that mean for them as a couple? Yeah, so you get the idea. It's like a short blurb, only a few sentences, but it really captures like, what is this book about? What is the question at the heart of it? And that is something that you may have known going into writing your first draft, or you may not have. It may have evolved, or it may have become clear to you as you wrote. But after you've written that first draft, you should be able to write this. You should be able to, there's something there. There's like an essence that you've captured, even if you haven't articulated it to yourself until you do this exercise. All right, for Privilege, which is my novel that came out in March, here's what I might have written as a future book review. Privilege is the story of a sexual assault and its aftermath from the perspectives of 3 women, all with different facts to draw on, incentives to believe one side over another, and fears about what the truth means for their futures. Okay, and then here is the future book review for Untamed by Glennon Doyle, which came out a few months ago. Glennon discovers that her own sense of what is right for her is something she values over all others' opinions and their wishes for her life. So it doesn't need to be long. I mean, that's one sentence. Like, one sentence is fine. You don't need to sweat this. You don't need to make it 500 words. But you do want to get down on paper what it is that you're going for, so that you have something to read for, so you have something to aspire to as you go into revision. Okay, when we go into revision without having something to aspire to, we don't have standards. Like, what is the standard? What is the bar by which we're judging our own work? What I'll tell you what the bar ends up being in the absence of something like this, that the bar ends up being obsession with sentences. In my experience, people upset, they get bogged down in like the prose itself and miss the overall story arc, or they become, and this has also happened to me, more like a chameleon and just start accepting everybody's ideas for what it should be, and then it just becomes like a story written by community, which very rarely works. Okay, so you're going to write your future book review, and I'm not actually looking at the chat right now, so if you're asking questions, I hopefully will get to them later, but I just want to make sure we get through all of this, and then I'm happy to answer questions. Okay, so just remember them. Okay, so now you have written your future book review, and you have set your draft aside for that, 3 to 6 weeks. You have found that sweet spot, and you are diving into reading like a reader. I do not want you to be this dude on the screen, okay? Even though it's a beautiful photo. I love the photo, which is why I included it in the draft, in the presentation. But I don't want you to be this guy. Why? Because look at this guy. He's working. He is very much in work mode, right? When you read like a reader, you want to be like this woman, okay? So she is. I just noticed she's reading about redesigning the brain, which is a little bit of a serious topic for the point of this slide. But she is sitting by a beautiful lake with sailboats. She is reclining. She's in shorts. Like you find a comfortable spot and read it like a reader. You probably have a pen out. I would have a pen out because it's very hard to resist making little thoughts that you have as you go, and that's fine. But, find a comfortable chair. I print out my draft. I print it out. I actually print out mine single spaced, because single spaced to me feels more like I'm reading a book, not like I'm reading a college essay or a draft that isn't quite ready and I need to be anxious about, it feels more like a book when it's single spaced. I have known students who I've worked with have even talked about how for this phase, they'll actually have it bound for $4 at FedEx so that it will, you can flip it. And it also feels, not only does it feel more like a book, but that's easier to deal with than all these pages. So I actually think that's a great idea and I'm going to steal that going forward. But you want to find somewhere comfortable. Where is your sitting? Where do you sit and read? Go to that spot. That should be the spot where you do this initial revision read. Okay. And as you're reading, you want to be reading for those things that a reader looks for that I mentioned a moment ago. Where does it take you away? Where are you bored? Where do you feel intrigued? Where do you have questions? Where are you confused? Like the things that a reader would be wondering, that you would be wondering as a reader, are the things that you want to be reading for as you're reading your draft. And what you don't want to be doing is editing. And we're going to talk more about that. Well, maybe right now. I forget which slide is next. Yes, not right now. So you don't want to be editing. You want to revise big to small. So big is structural things like the overall arc of the story, the character development, what happens to the characters, big events in the story, the tone of your book, things like this. These are big considerations, right? That is revision. When you're revising at that level, it's absolutely revision. And then when you get to kind of the smaller level, it's still revision when you get down into, deciding what scenes to include and where chapter breaks should be, the kind of shape of each scene. That's still revision as well. But as we get smaller and smaller and smaller, now we're kind of revising at the level of the sentence. Now we're actually getting a lot closer to what I would call editing. Editing, and the definitions of these are a little bit fuzzy. Where they overlap, where the Venn diagram of revising and editing, where they overlap is to some extent partially subjective. It depends on how people define these things. But editing is generally understood, right, is like the level of working on the grammar of your sentences and the smallest piece of prose, which is the sentence. Whereas revising is really the stuff that happens on this larger level. And as you revise, it's really important that you revise big to small. And the reason for this is that you could spend as I think it's Oscar Wilde is reported to have done, an entire weekend working on one sentence, right? He said, like, I spent the morning putting in a comma and I spent the afternoon taking it out again, which is always that story. I think the first time I heard that, I was like, I don't know, in my teens or early 20s, and it has haunted me forever. Because talk about miserable. I mean, that is a level of misery. Maybe he enjoyed it, but to me, that sounds miserable. And I always feared that I had to be that miserable in order to be a successful and good writer, which I eventually realized is not the case. And I'm very relieved for that. I'm very relieved that I have never spent a full morning putting in a comma and the afternoon taking it out. And I doubt I ever will. But let's say you are that person. You are someone who would gladly do that because you get that really into the nitty gritty, the tedious detail. The last thing you want to do is do that on a sentence that is going to be plucked out of the draft because it's in a scene or a chapter that doesn't actually fit with the overall arc. So the idea here is you want to figure out what the big pieces are that need to be there first, so that you don't spend all this time perfecting the little pieces that end up getting tossed out. Okay, like that. I mean, writing, to an extent, writing is not an efficient process. None of us would be writers if we cared about efficiency. Like we would be iBankers or something. It is not efficient, but we can make it more efficient. Like we can try to be as efficient as possible, just if only to make our lives easier. And involved in that, I think, is this idea of revising big to small. So I'm going to show you the tool I use for this called the revision pyramid. And I'll also give you the link at the end of the presentation for where you can go to get your own copy. And I'll just email you a PDF of it. So this is the revision pyramid. starting big to small. So in your first pass at revision, you really want to be focused on the big pieces, big side of the pyramid, right? The overall storyline, your character development, and your chapter sequence. So we're talking big chunks of the story. Then once you're really comfortable with how all of that is working, then you're going to go back in and then you're going to notice the next level down. You're like, within each chapter, are the arcs working? Am I comfortable with the scenes I've selected for each chapter? Am I comfortable with the order of those scenes? Once you're comfortable with things on that level, you'll move down to the final, the final tip of the paragraph, which is really the editing stage. And this is where we get into paragraph and sentence level, the flow of the paragraphs, the sound of the sentences, the specific word choice. This is the level on which, you know, you would bring in like ProWritingAid, or you'd read your draft aloud. That is something that I absolutely do, but not until I get to this stage. Just read it aloud to hear how the sentences sound. This is when I'm actually paying attention to the rhythm of that language. Okay, so to recap, and then I'll open this up for questions. And again, I'll send you this. I'll give you the link for where you should go. It's just maryadkinswriter.com/revision. If you go there, I'll send you the PDF of this pyramid that you can use as your reference. But to recap, kind of what the big takeaways are that we've just talked about is, you want to set it aside for 3 to 6 weeks until you come at it and you neither love it nor hate it. You just, you know, you recognize that some things are salvageable, but also that there's work to be done. You want to create a future book review for yourself. So that is something you could be doing while this is baking. If you're someone who just really needs to be doing something, you're itching to dive into revision, writing your future book review could be something that you're doing while it's in the oven, baking away. Then you want to approach it like a reader. Print it out, maybe get it bound at a local copy shop if one is open in these weird times. Sit in your favorite chair and read it like a reader would. And then as you do go into revision, try to really focus on the big pieces first before you dive into those smaller and smaller elements. So think upside down pyramid or funnel. Yeah, funnel, that's what it's called. It's like, today's the right term there? Yeah, funnel. So here is where you would go to get that revision pyramid if you want your own, maryadkinswriter.com/revision. And then I also put the URL on here of my course, the 12-week book draft, if you're interested in checking that out. I know this is a revision seminar, so if you're here, you may already have a draft that you're working on revising. The 12-week book draft is a course that walks you through writing your book from start to finish, but a number of people revise their book through the course. So it's actually suitable to revision as well, which was really cool for me to discover because I hadn't designed it that way. So it was fun to see as people come in that it actually works for that too. So you can check that out there. And now I'm not sure how questions work, Lisa, but I'm happy to answer them.
Hi, okay, great, I'm back. I've just dropped a link and I've gotten it wrong. I was just trying to drop the link to your revision. We'll try again. Mary Adkins. Oh, Adkins.
Over the D. Yeah, it's ADKINS.
AINS writer.com/revision. Let's try again.
/revision. Yeah.
All right, let me know if you have any luck with that.
A lot of times people try it with a T.
Adkins.
Who is that's a diet guy. Yes, that's the right one.
Okay, great.
I do see some questions in the Q&A. Should I just?
Yeah, there's some good ones there. So that link doesn't look like it's working. If they go just to your main website, will they be able to get to the download?
Oh, let me just try that link one more time. That's so bizarre. It's working for me.
Is it?
Okay, so there's a 404 afterwards, people say.
Oh yeah, so I've got it now. Let me try this. It's redirected me.
Oh, I think, yeah, the thank you page must be the thank you page, it looks like, is down, which is bizarre, but it looks like the form itself is working. So you should still receive the pyramid.
Okay.
Let me just confirm that, because if not, I'm gonna give you a different link to use. And then I'll absolutely answer some questions here. So.
Okay, well, we'll send out a replay of this, and I'll include all of the links, so I can include an updated link there for anybody that's still having trouble. Oh, it looks like a few people are getting it. Okay, great. I've got some really good questions here. So for those of you that still have a few things that you want to ask, go ahead and add them to the Q&A box. But I'm just going to start right at the top. One of the first questions that came in was from someone, they haven't said their name, but they're writing a novel that's about 105,000 words. They say they don't remember the beginning sentences, but obviously recall the last ones. If you start editing straight away, wouldn't the time taken to edit from the start be sufficient to forget those earlier sentences by the time you get to them? She or he doesn't like your rule of stepping away.
I love this. I love this way of trying to get around the
rule. Editing loophole.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't think I buy that you're not gonna. You're gonna read your draft pretty fast. I'm guessing you're gonna read it over the course of a few days. So by the time you get to the middle, you're gonna have remembered writing the middle or the end. So I would still set it aside. I would set it aside for, 3 to 6 weeks.
Well, and really, that question came in really early before you talked about the process of starting big and going small, which I think probably addresses that question, because if the first time you're reading it, if you are trying to look at that big arc, you will get right through to the beginning. If you were going to start at sentence level, then, you probably could, but yeah. I really like your process of starting big and going down to like your comma level.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, me too. It really helps a lot. And yeah, I do see that was an earlier one now.
Yeah. So another question is, what is the key difference between a future book review and a hook or a log line? They look similar.
Great. Yeah, they are similar. I think you can think of it that way if you already know what those are. I mean, I don't use that language sometimes because I think it is a little scary and scary to people, whereas everybody kind of knows what a book review is, and then future book review makes sense because the book isn't done yet. It isn't published. So I kind of prefer that because it's more fun and less daunting, but you can absolutely think of it as like a log line.
Yeah, although I think the thing that I like about the review is that it does leave you asking questions a bit more, like the ones that you showed us as examples. You come away thinking, what's going to happen to these? You've set it up, but you don't really give it. Whereas I think with a log line, often you do want to give a bit more of the course of the story and where it's going to go, instead of just intriguing people with little bites.
That's a good point. Yeah, it's a teaser in that it's open.
A teaser, yeah,
is open as to like what could happen. It's a more suspenseful. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and Jack or John or someone in the comments was saying that where is it? It was a really good point, saying that they had done this before, the writing a future book review. And then, it says, so John says, I have used the future book review. It made me write the book in order to meet the expectations created in the review.
Yes, me too.
I love that. Me
too. And it's funny because that's actually one way in which I think it came to me, this idea, is that, as you're working on your revision, once you sell the book and get an editor, you continue to revise, and even you're still kind of working on that draft, even as the publishing company is working on marketing copy for you. And at one point I read some marketing copy for my book and thought, this makes the book sound really good. Like, I think the book is as good as this marketing copy sounds.
Yeah. I feel like I use that future perspective a lot in all sorts of aspects of my life, because it just lets you think about, goals and what you're trying to create. Like even for ProWritingAid, we had a board meeting once, I remember, and we sort of set the direction of the company based on stories written about our company 10 years from now and what we wanted them to say. Did we want it to say it was a small company that stayed small and stayed tight with readers, or did we want it to be bought up by Google and turned into a major conglomerate? And like, what did we want that article about us to say? And I just feel like that sort of future perspective is so good in so many elements of your life.
I love that. You could even do that with an obit, not to get dark, but like about yourself.
Yeah.
What people to say about you when you're gone.
Yeah, exactly. So that sort of fits into Carmen's question, which says, is the future book review exercise most useful after you've written your first draft, or is it beneficial in the middle of writing it to help you set direction?
That's such a good question, Carmen. I love it. I think it can be really helpful in the middle of your first draft, or even before you start your first draft. I wouldn't put that kind of pressure on myself to do it if it's, if it's not don't feel like, in other words, don't feel like you need to be able to write a future book review or you're not ready to start your book. Like, absolutely not. But I do think it can kind of be clarifying in a way that could be useful even as you're writing that first draft. Great question.
Yeah, I think so too. Edward says that he's more of a seat of the pants writer. And how could you incorporate this into his writing style?
So which thing, the future book review, did he say?
I think that's what he's talking about. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm a seat of your pants writer as well. So I don't outline or teach outlining. So I'm with you. And I think this fits actually really well with that, because you're not trying to impose anything, but you are trying to recognize what's there. And I think being a pantser, or writing by the seat of your pants, doesn't mean you're writing something that doesn't have meaning, right? Like, it doesn't mean you're not writing something that doesn't have an essence that can be captured in words. And if you are, I don't know, that's an issue. You're going to have trouble selling it. So like, you want to be able to articulate what that essence is, even if you're someone who does sort of let it go wherever it's going to go.
Yeah, I think so. You're still going to want to know what you want to say, or what your story is. Maybe not what it's going to be about. That's maybe not the right term, because maybe you don't quite know who that is, but there must be a reason why you want to write this story. Is it to tell the story of a person? Is it because of an adventure? Why are you writing it? And I think the review should capture that, right? What are you hoping to get across?
Yeah, and maybe you also, another reason why you might not be ready to do the future book review until after you've written the first draft, like some people might not be able to write it in the middle of writing it. I don't write it until after I finish the first draft. So, because then that's kind of when you've figured out what's there, or I have. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Man, there are a lot of questions here. So we'll just keep going. So somebody's asking about the read your book like a reader aspect. What's your feeling on e-readers versus hard copies? Or do you think it loses something?
I think it just depends on what you like to do. I know some people are huge e-readers. My mom reads so many books. She has so many ebooks, like thousands of ebooks. And I can't get into it. I keep trying. So since I'm not an e-reader, I don't read ebooks. For me, that experience reading my own book on a device would not feel like it does for me when I read. So I think it's just, you want it to feel like it does for you when you read. So
yeah. See, I'm an E. I feel like slightly shameful saying that I have now finally become an e-reader. And so taking my manuscript and like turning it into EPUB format and sticking it on my Kindle so that I could read it that way was a real thrill. And that really felt like reading a book. I'd only ever read novels in that format. So to see my own words in that format was quite exciting. So, it's whatever makes you feel like a reader, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Tara has a good question. What are your tips for getting distracted by the small stuff when you're revising for the big stuff?
Oh, Tara is her name? Yeah, Tara, That's such a good question. Oof. I find that really hard. So I have had to force myself not to sit there and edit the sentences as I'm reading. Because otherwise I will, and I do want to. But I think, now I trust the process, and the process is okay, if I sit here and tweak, like if this, page 2 of this draft that I've printed out, if I finish page 2 and it is just covered with all of these grammatical changes and insertions, where has that gotten me? Like, first of all, it's going to take forever for me to get through this whole draft like that. Second of all, if I do that, I'm not going to have read this draft for what I need to be reading it for, which is the shape of the story. And so I'm actually going to have created more work for myself, and I'm going to be kind of stuck, like, because I'm not going to know where to go from here. And this is why I had to revise my novel 19 times, because I was doing that. So I think I've learned the hard way what happens when I do that, and that's how I stop myself. But I do have to fight the impulse, because boy, do I want to tweak it. But I also have realized I want to tweak I want to work on the language even after the book comes out. Like when I'm doing readings, if I'm reading from the published copy, I'm like, I don't like this.
Did I write that? Yeah, no, I know. And one of the things that I think is really irritating is when you spend tons of time like getting down to the small detail on like a big paragraph or even a chapter, and then you look at the narrative structure and then you cut it. And so then that's just like, that is wasted time. So make sure you've got all your pieces and your structure and everything in place before you start working on that, because kill your darlings. It might go.
Exactly. I was going to talk about kill your darlings. Like that's like dressing up your darling in its most adorable outfit before you kill it.
Yeah.
Make it as hard on ourselves as possible.
Yeah, exactly. So think big, make sure it's all going to be there. And because part of the danger of that is if you spend tons of time fixing things, then you're going to want to keep them, even if like,
yes,
I don't think this fits. Then you'll be trying to like wedge it in here or add in here. What if I add a subplot to make sense of it or whatever? Don't do that. Think big. Look at your big pieces.
Oh, that is such a good point. Like really, even if you're subconsciously doing that, you start to try to kind of build the story around it, because you're like, I spent so much time on this thing. I definitely did that with when you read this, there's a very small character who's a cult leader in the story. And I was so excited by this cult leader that I wrote his entire cult treatise, which I was so proud of, that and had spent so long writing that I wanted it. I kept trying to work the entire treatise into the novel. And my editor kept saying, like, I just don't think we need this much of the treatise. So I would cut like a little bit more, and she's like, still too much of the treatise. So I think we got 2 little excerpts of the treatise in there, and that was it. But that's because it didn't belong in there. I was just like, I spent so long on it, I want it in there.
Yeah. But I bet it was really, the whole process of writing it was probably really essential in order to understand, your world and your cult and who the people are that are in it and how that all works.
And fun making up a cult.
Yeah.
Fun, creative.
So it's all worth it, even if not all the words end up there. And if you end up with like a huge fan fiction site, maybe you can have that as a little freebie.
Right. Or if I ever, writing doesn't work out and I need to start a cult, I'll have a.
Yeah, you're set. You've already got it set up. Okay, John wants to know how long your revision process is.
Oh, great question. So I tend to revise in 5 to 6 weeks. So a little over a month. It usually takes me a little over a month.
And that's everything from big to small?
No. So that's a good question. So the small, I think of the small as like something I want to do at the very end when I feel really good about it. So that's like the big to the middle. And then then that's when I share it with people. And these days it's my agent and my editor and my writing group. And then before I had an editor, it was like my writing group or a friend. And then once I feel really confident in the story in general, that's when I try to do one pass on the really small level. But that 5 to 6 weeks, I think, is nice for doing a big revision, because it feels ambitious. It always feels ambitious to me, but also it's doable. It's doable if I'm prioritizing the revision, I should say. I realize if you have like a full-time job and a family, maybe a month is going to feel fast to revise. Longer, but that's what I try to do.
Yeah. Okay, great. Heather wants to know, how do you keep going when you feel like your story is a dud? Because I think everybody gets to that point where they're like, is this even worth doing? So how do you push through, and how do you know when you're on the right track or the wrong track?
I love this question. Thank you, Heather. So I usually what happens, and usually what I tell people when they tell me it just feels like they've lost interest, it's a dud, it's boring, nothing's happening, where do I go from here? It's just that you're lucky because you're getting a sign. Your story is telling you something. And the thing your story is telling you is that something needs to happen. It is time to take a turn. And it is going to be a turn you didn't see coming, which is why you feel like it's, we're at a dead end. I don't see any, like you literally see nowhere to go. You feel like you're at a dead end. Maybe the story is done. Maybe there's nothing here. But it turns out there's like a little path right over there that you weren't looking at, and you've got to be open to it. You've got to like see with fresh eyes in order to notice it. But I think it's a great sign that like, it's just something needs to happen now. So what I tell people to do, and what I'll do myself, is in this situation, just sit down and brainstorm everything that could happen right now in the story. Nothing is too crazy, because you're not wedded to anything you write down, right? You don't have to do anything. It's your choice. So write down everything that could happen. She could die. She could marry, this person. She could run into this person. She could find out she has this disease. She could, just write down everything, and you'll find some things you write down are like, that's the most ridiculous, aliens land. It's like, no, that's not, I'm not gonna make aliens. But then you'll get to something and it'll feel like, oh, like it'll scare you a little bit.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. That would be interesting. I would have fun writing that. I like thinking about that when, it has that energy, it's kind of pulling you toward it. And that seems to be the thing that brings it back in and brings me back in as the writer when I'm in that situation.
Yeah. Yeah. Or I like to play the, what's the worst thing that could happen here? Like, if everything for this character that I've created, what if everything went wrong right now? Like, what's the thing that would break them? And dig around in that little pile of garbage and see if there's anything in there that I can salvage.
Right. Because then even if you don't necessarily go with the worst thing that could happen to them, like you've discovered something about like what could stretch them, or maybe there's like a little piece of it that you use, or you figure out what threatens them in a way that helps you figure out what you do want to do. I like that.
Yeah. Okay. Shai says, can you identify in the revision if your writing style has drifted? And actually that's happened to me. I've started off in one sort of style and then it's sort of modified or changed. It just feels different.
I think that's a really big benefit of trying to read like a reader, because as a reader, you notice that stuff, right? You're like, wow, this was really engaging at the beginning, and now it just like her tone has changed. If I'm reading someone else's book, I think reading like a reader does help you notice that, and also helps notice when when the writing gets pretty dry. I think you'll notice when you're kind of bored, your thoughts are drifting. And that's something I would that's why I would have the pen as I'm reading like a reader, because that's when I put in the margin, like bored. You can come back and make this more fun.
Yeah. So I've got someone who's actually asking about your notes, like as you're reading in the different phases, how do you make notes for yourself in order to make those changes?
So I'm just trying to read like a reader, right? So I'm really resisting the temptation to make too many specific notes. But what I am doing is taking notes of things like where I'm bored, what I love, I'll put like a heart if I love it, where I think the pacing is off. So if it's like, oh, this dinner scene just flew by, we need more, I'll put that in the margin, like needs to go on longer. Sometimes if I see it, like it needs to go on longer, and also I see what needs to happen. The waiter I'll jot that down too. Like the waiter needs to come back and give them dessert, and just go ahead and get down, like, this is how I think this needs to be longer in this moment.
Or this dinner scene is way too long. Cut it down.
Oh yeah. And then just think, if it's too long, boring. Yeah. So just kind of that big level gut reaction type notes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then once you get into your middle of the pyramid, did they become a bit more detailed?
Yeah. And then the middle of the pyramid. So good question. Just logistically, I didn't really talk about that. So the first read, when you're reading like the reader, you're making these kind of big notes. Then when I'm going back to execute on that big note, those big notes, that's when I'm getting into the middle as well. So that's when it's like, okay, so that's when you're actually physically I'm doing things like deleting this paragraph, like writing the new scene or extending this scene. And that I kind of think of that as like the middle level of the pyramid.
Okay. So Christina wants to know how much of your first draft, like what percentage do you think makes it through into your final draft? And I bet you the answer to that question is quite different from your first book compared to your second book.
I was just about to say that. For my first book, maybe about 30% of the first draft made it into the last one.
That's not much. So 70% just
gone. Yeah.
Changed, modified. Okay.
I mean, like I said, there was a cult treatise in there. So that was gone. But now there's, I mean, of the Palm Beach, which I just finished and comes out in August, I would say I did cut out the whole, maybe 70 to 80% of it stayed in. So, which I think is pretty high.
Yeah.
It probably doesn't
sound that's what we always say. The more you write, the more you do, the more you edit, everything you learned going through that revision process and that edit process the first time.
Yeah.
Second time, you already know it and you'll make fewer of those mistakes.
Yeah. And that's not to say I don't have, I think we probably all still, and will always have that fantasy when you finish the first draft that like, I'm the person who just wrote a perfect first draft.
It's perfect as it is.
I'm barely going to have to change anything. Of course I still have a little bit, I like have that fantasy and it's never true.
Yeah. Okay. Nina has a good question. She says, do you have suggested criteria that she can use just to know whether or not she's answered the basic question of the book? So I think that comes back to the sort of review question.
Yeah, thanks for bringing it back to the review. Yeah, that's a great, so when you finish that read where you read like a reader, I would actually try the exercise again, to do a second take at the review, but now it's not aspirational. Now you're writing a review for the book you just read. So now it's not the future book review, it's the draft review, right? And try to make it really realistic and you can try to make it a teaser, like make it sexy, but still make it accurate to what you just read. And then I think it's a really interesting exercise to put those side by side and see how they differ. Because I think that can really help you home in on what it is you want to address in revision too.
Yeah, but then I would think that the review is similar to like a scaled down version of your main manuscript, in that write it and then set it aside for a bit, do a bit of work and come back to it once you've forgotten the sentences a bit and see how it sits with you. If it still feels like you've got it, especially if you are writing it at the beginning of doing your first round of revision and then writing it again after you've done that first read as a reader. Interesting to see whether or not they pair up and whether or not you've answered that question or got across that feeling that you had that you had aspired to when you had written your review.
Yeah, and it could be that you've answered a different question, or you've gone and you like it better, right? Like it may be that your future book review wasn't. You're like, oh, that was actually for a different book, but I like I like the direction this is going more. And still, it's useful either way.
Yeah, then especially if you're a pantser, you may end up answering a completely different question or getting across a completely different idea.
Yeah.
Are you primarily fiction when what you work with? I've got a question here about writing creative nonfiction.
Yeah, I work with a lot of memoirists, so I can probably.
Okay, so Carol's asking about the process if you're writing creative nonfiction, because you can't change as much of the storyline in nonfiction. So what does editing the big parts look like, and how is that different?
Yeah. So I think it's still actually very similar, because you're still choosing, right? Your life is massive and you're still being very selective about what goes into the story and what should go into the story. So I think it's actually still a really similar process of choosing what are you trying to get across with the story? Like what aspect of your life are you highlighting, and why are you choosing certain scenes to go in instead of others? You have a long conversation with the grocery store clerk. And it's like, should that go in or should it not go in? Well, it depends on what the question at the heart of the story is, and how relevant that conversation is to it. So,
and there's still a lot of ways to structure creative nonfiction. Not everybody, just because it's nonfiction doesn't mean it has to be chronological. Just because it's nonfiction doesn't mean it can't use all of those sort of storytelling tools and features, right?
Right, totally.
Yeah. I'm just aware that we're running out of time. I am going to drop all of those various links again, just in case they got lost.
That link is working, by the way. It's just the thank you page that I will have to fix, but I will get your email and send you the revision pyramid if you use that link.
Okay, great. And we will send out a recording of this tomorrow. Mary, are you okay to share those slides? Would you be happy to do that?
Sure, happy to.
Okay, great. So I will include that in the email that we send out tomorrow, as well as all these various different links. And any last advice that you want to finish with?
Super. No. Happy writing. Thank you all for coming. I'm so happy to have had you here to talk writing and revising today.
Right. Okay. So there's one really good question here from Jason. He says he's a first-time writer. He's working on his first book and currently editing it. How do you know when you're done? How do you personally know when you're done and finished with it? That's a good question to finish with.
I think you hear it from other people. Give it to somebody you trust, and they say something like this: "I couldn't put it down." They say something like, "I couldn't put it down," or "I loved it."
And not just your mom. Your mom will say that. Give it to someone that's going to give you proper feedback and and tell you the truth.
Yeah, I think you hear it from someone else, and it's interesting. I say that not because I think if you don't give it to someone else, you'll think it's done too early. I think if you don't give it to someone else, you'll think it's never done, and you'll keep working on it and working on it and working on it.
Because you can tweak forever. English language, there's 100 ways to say every sentence.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Like I said, my books, once they're published, I would still be editing them if I could. But at some point, someone tells you you're finished.
Yeah, great. All right, well, thank you everyone for coming. Hopefully we'll see you at another session again in the future. And thank you so much, Mary. We've really enjoyed this.
My pleasure. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.